Hey there, Jeff here, and today we're talking about why you don't want to release your music on Spotify and other streaming services right away, and what you should do instead.
You could be larger than life, bigger than the world, living out the hopes and dreams of every boy and every girl. You know you could.
What's up, friends? Jeff here, as usual, coming from the home studio in Las Vegas, Nevada. Now, I know this is going to sound extremely counterintuitive to almost anyone hearing this, but if you stick with me for the next couple of minutes, I'm going to explain why making your music available on all of the streaming platforms is actually keeping you from having a successful career as a professional musician. Now, it's no secret that there's been a massive shift in the way people consume music over the last several years. And now, because of streaming, we all basically have the entire history of recorded sound in our pockets with us at all times. And while it truly is incredible that we can discover new music or explore an artist's entire back catalog for next to nothing, we tend to forget that the vast majority of musicians still haven't really benefited financially from this system, and in fact are making even less money than they ever have in the past. The record labels, on the other hand, love the streaming services because they can make a ton of money licensing their catalog to these platforms, which helps to curb all the illegal downloading and piracy we saw back in the late 90s and early 2000s when sites like Napster, Morpheus, and LimeWire were all the rage. Today, the major streaming giants like Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Music are similar to the old record labels in that they can make the majority of their money on the 1% of the mainstream artists generating the most streams, while the smaller independent musicians fight for leftover scraps. Still, though, we see thousands of independent or smaller label artists and bands promoting their latest releases on streaming to grab a few seconds of people's attention, hoping to convert these casual listeners into die-hard fans that'll somehow end up spending money on the music they just streamed essentially for free. What's worse is that we're now seeing some of these already financially challenged musicians spending their hard-earned money on expensive social media and pay-per-click ads trying to drive people to stream their music in hopes of generating a few spins, which might net them a couple of bucks if we're being generous. I mean, how long can you spend money you don't have on advertising that might generate a few cents if you're lucky, after all is said and done? For any other business in any other industry, that would be a completely unsustainable model. Yet the streaming giants want you to think this is somehow a scalable strategy for you and your music. This strategy, if you even want to call it that, basically amounts to once again paying for exposure, hoping either that someone will hear your brilliant masterpiece, recognize your genius, and wave a golden-plated record contract in your face with $1 million advance, or you'll get enough plays and spins to eke out a decent living from your music. And the chances of one or both of these happening are slim to none. Even if you wanted to aim for a record deal, which by the way, you don't, but that's another conversation altogether. No label will take you seriously until you've proven that you can build a fan base from the ground up anyway. So if putting your music on the streaming services is a bad idea, what then should you do instead? Well, first off, it's not that you shouldn't ever make your music available for streaming. You just don't want it to be the first thing you do with your new releases, and here's why. Think about how a movie usually gets released to the world. At first, you start seeing a few trailers on television or online with some of the most action-packed or funniest scenes from the film that spark your interest and make you want to see it in the theater. Then, assuming you really dug that movie, you'll either go back and pay to see it again, or the movie will be made available to buy or rent a few months after its initial run in the theaters. At that point, the film studios will start a completely new marketing campaign to push sales or rentals for people to watch the movie at home or on the go. After a few weeks of pushing people to buy or rent the movie, they'll release it either exclusively to a specific channel like HBO or Showtime, and then after that channel has been exploited to the fullest, they'll eventually release the film to streaming services. Even then, it might only be available on certain channels. The point is that they don't just premiere the movie everywhere all at once. They release it through specific channels at different times, with each channel getting its own marketing campaign along the way. Now, I know what you're thinking. A lot of movies are getting released directly to streaming these days, and while that is true, the basic model that's been in place for decades still applies, since most of the time a brand new first-run movie is only released to a specific streaming platform, which still allows them to control how and when their content gets consumed by the public. Now, as a musician, you'll have an advantage over the movie industry because you don't have to force people to physically seek out your recordings the way the film studios do with first-run movies at a theater. The bottom line is that you can and should be doing this with your music. Instead of posting all over social media, or worse yet, paying for boosted posts or ads that drive people to stream your music on all of the different services, you need to take control of the conversation and drive your potential audience to a place that you actually own, preferably to a simple web page where you'll give away a few songs for free in exchange for a name and email address, and that'll start the process of building a list of names that you own and can market to over time with new music, merch, live shows, or virtual performances, and so on. Now, there's nothing that says you can't drive people to your social media pages or the streaming sites after you get their contact info. You just want to make sure the very first interaction a potential fan has with you is through a medium that you own and control. Social media and streaming platforms are great, but ultimately you don't own any of the data. So if the platform shuts down or you somehow manage to get kicked off for some reason, you still will have built up a list of people you can market your goods and services to forever, regardless of what happens on the other platforms. Remember all the people that built these large followings on MySpace back in the day, only to lose all of that traction when they essentially shut their doors, leaving all these bands and musicians out to dry with no way to reach the audience they worked so hard to develop. So instead of building your house on rented land, you want to make sure you're building a foundation that'll outlive any current or future platform, regardless of how popular it might be at the time. This will also help keep you from wasting money on boosted posts or paid ads when you want to communicate with your fans and listeners, because the social media platforms severely limit the organic, aka free, reach of your posts because they want you to pay so more of your fans and followers see them. So even if you've got 1 million fans who've liked your page, a very tiny percentage of them will ever see your posts because the social networks make their money from ad revenue, which means if you want everyone on your page to see your posts, you'll have to pay for that privilege. So remember, if you're posting and sharing your music on the social networks, especially if you're spending money on any kind of advertising, that's all well and good, as long as you're giving yourself the advantage by sending any potential fans to a place that you control and where you can build up your list and develop a relationship with your fans for years to come. So now that you've heard my take, I'd love to know what you think. Also, be sure to tap the button to like, subscribe, follow, all that good stuff so you're always up to date with the latest content. And of course, if you're interested in working together, we can talk about how I can help get your machine set up and in place so you're never held hostage by the changing social media landscape ever again. Looking forward to connecting with you, and I'll see you soon.